Okay. Hi, everybody. I think we are just getting started. So just give us 1 minute. We're going to just wait for a few more people to come in and we will get started. All right, so we are going to get started just for the sake of being on time. 12 o'clock, maybe it's your lunch break. So we're going to get started with today's presentation. So today we have Media Wars, Episode 1, The Planning Menace. I am Chris Fasano, and I'm joined by Caitlin Perry. We are both working at Overit Media in Albany, New York. And today we're going to talk about, media strategy, how to plan media, traditional media, and those things. For full transparency, I know nothing about Star Wars. This Caitlin is more into the Star Wars than me, so this will be fun in that regard. So if she makes veiled references towards Star Wars, I'm not going to get them. So I'll, maybe you guys out there will, but I definitely won't. So just a quick introduction for myself and Caitlin. I am the Chief Growth Officer here at Overit, and my job is to help grow your business. And one of the most foundational ways we do that is through a sound media strategy. So that is really sort of the bread and butter of acquisition marketing, making sure that you have a sound strategy in your media, whether that's digital and traditional, which we're going to talk about a lot today. Everything starts with having a strategy behind your media, how you budget it, how you plan all that. And really over at our media guru is Caitlin Perry. So introduce Caitlin right now. Kate.
Hi, I am Caitlin Perry, the Director of Media and Digital Strategy at Overit. I've been here for coming up on 3 years pretty soon at Overit. And yeah, as Chris said, I love media. I've always loved media. Even as a kid, I remember watching commercials and wondered how they even got up onto TV, how they knew what to put on TV, things along those lines. And I really didn't even know that a media planner, media buyer was really much of a thing until about 7 years ago. And when I joined a marketing department, and after that, I had the chance and opportunity to learn. And that's when I was able to jump in and utilize what I've, observed over the years, and use the force to,
There you go.
There you go. Use the force to plan traditional media and digital media as well. But yeah, today's focus definitely on traditional first.
So let's go to on slide 3. We'll talk about what we're going to learn today, and I'll talk through this quick, Kate, and then you can take over and go through and get into the details of what we're going to do. So we're going to talk about traditional media, what that is, what is media planning and buying, how do you plan. Budgeting, there's an exclamation point there because it is so important to not just budget appropriately, but track your budgets and know where all of that money lives. Strategies can be very complex. There's a lot of different places. So I've learned from Caitlin the value of organization in your planning and budgeting. And then measurement, which is something that I push my team always on, is how do you measure? How do you know what's working? So we're going to talk a little bit about that as well. So let's get started on the next slide, which is really what is traditional media. And then we can jump in right now. All right.
Great. Yeah. Thank you, Chris. So what is traditional media? So on slide 5 here, traditional media, you're going to hear different names for it. Traditional marketing, paid media, traditional advertising, any of those. It's when advertisements are placed for mass media consumption. This is, again, because it's traditional, it's within the name. It's what has been going on for years, centuries, millennia. So the goal is driving brand awareness, brand authority, interest, and ultimately sales. But it's always going to start with brand awareness, which I know is a really big piece that we bring into for talking with our clients, is we want to make sure that people are aware that the company, the product, anything there, it exists. And then we have to build up that rapport. We have to drive the interest within the messaging, the placement, and then ultimately we can close on leads and sales for the client. So mediums for placement include television, radio, out of home, direct mail, and print, all of which I'm going to dive into a little bit deeper here. And from your commute to your couch to your front door, that's traditional marketing. That is traditional media. And it still works. We definitely live in a digital age. Again, part of my title is Director of Digital Strategy as well. So I know how digital and traditional can work together and meld together. And traditional marketing is not dying. It's not dead. It's not going anywhere. It's just changed. So on to the next slide for 6. Slide 6, television is not limited to just cable and broadcast. This is something that's very important to know to be able to push people on. Streaming options have not only opened the door to brilliant shows, new filmmakers, but has opened the door to new advertising avenues. I've mentioned it so many times internally to my team, but we are 100% still in a golden age of television. This renewed golden age of television probably started in 2010 or so. And that is because of the amount of streaming options that we have now and the competition that broadcasts, such as NBC, ABC, all of those stations, what they know they have to fight against, which would be Netflix and Hulu and Amazon Prime. So what are those streaming options? You have Hulu, you have OTT. OTT stands for over the top television. And some people also refer to it as CTV, connected television. So there is a difference between the two, but we tend to use them interchangeably. So it's basically streaming versus a connected device. Over the top, meaning that it's something that's Hulu, Netflix, Amazon Prime, it's coming through the internet. A CTV, a connected television, is something that's going to go through Roku, Amazon Fire Stick, any of those things that have to have an actual connection through your television. And that's also, this is going with the growing trend of smart TVs in homes, is how media consumption changes, but also how you place those buys on television. YouTube is also something that is very important when being mindful of your television. So YouTube, typically, I put this within my traditional media buys because you have to plan it through Google AdWords. But YouTube is the second largest search engine in the world, obviously followed by Google. YouTube is excellent for education. It is excellent for placing media within, say, like CNN, for instance. Say I'm reaching business makers. I can place something right on CNN's channel with the demographics that I so choose through Google Ads. So there are targeting capabilities there. And those targeting capabilities fall in line with Hulu and OTT as well. So when I purchase through Hulu and OTT, I'm able to not only narrow it down from county to zip code to city, anything along those lines, but I am able to use third and first party data through those so that, again, I'm bridging where we're going with traditional media and digital media. So we're able to use those targeting options and really help make sure that we are getting in front of the right audience.
So Kate, just quick thing, like OTT, is it because it's viewed a lot of it on a television that it's categorized as traditional media? Because you think about it as non-traditional because it's new, but like, so do people, are people calling this a digital technology, or it's still under the umbrella as traditional?
So that's a great question. I'm a little different in this. So I actually budget OTT and Hulu as traditional media. A lot of people still within the industry are going to continue to put it into digital because of those digital and targeting capabilities. The reason why I place it under traditional is because of the amount of budget that you really need to be able to place it in there. So digital, when we talk about display ads, when we talk about even YouTube, it's less expensive typically, you know, depending on the type of target that I'm looking for? Am I looking at an objective for awareness versus conversions? Along those lines, the CPM is always going to shift, but the CPM isn't going to be the CPM that you get for Hulu and OTT.
Right.
So those will range anywhere from $35 to $40 to $45 to even $50. And it can get even more expensive depending on the vendor you use, and that type of, again, the targeting capabilities that you're able to use as well. So the reason why I put it there is because of the budget is first. And the second part is also because of the content. The content is a television commercial. It is still a television commercial. It is still a 15-second, it's still a 30-second. And people, while they're consuming it in a new way through streaming, they are still also consuming it in a way in the traditional way. You're sitting on your couch.
Right. And the production is more traditional in that regard, I guess.
Exactly. Okay. And you can, OTT is also counted, keeping in mind with your tablets and with your mobile devices. So it can reach you at any given moment, at any time, unlike broadcast and cable, where unless you have a streaming option through like your cable provider, like Spectrum, you're not getting that. And those ads, just a quick note on that, like if you're talking about a Comcast or a Spectrum, if I go to a sales rep and I place a buy for broadcast, for cable placements with that rep, I have to buy additional spots in order to get on their streaming. So that is something very important to keep in mind, because it's going to change your budget and it's going to change the schedule. So it's a type of communication that you need to be able to have with your sales reps. And all this being said about Hulu, OTT, YouTube, broadcast is still a really great option for viewership. I am absolutely not discounting broadcast at all. It's still one of my go-tos, and there's lots of different options that you have. I do love, specifically within the Albany, Schenectady, Troy DMA, I do love typically weekend morning news. They are very consistent on their ratings. They're very consistent on their rates, and I'm able to get really good placement and frequency there. But I've also gotten into a place where I'm really trying to hone in, and I'm willing to spend a little bit more money when it comes to not necessarily prime time, but like what I kind of call more engaged viewership, which is going to be your NFL, your NBA, MLB, NHL, any of the sports, essentially. The Olympics are coming up. That's going to be a great place to be as well. Super Bowl. Super Bowl is definitely one that you have to consider, and I can talk about that a little bit more later on as I get into the budgeting and any concerns there. But there's still a lot of great options with broadcast as well, but it's knowing your audience and it's knowing what your goal is. So if my goal is to really just get that message, that brand out there and that awareness piece, I'm going to be blanketing it as much as possible throughout different news, through different primetime shows, through different sporting events. But if I'm really trying to hone in and I'm trying to get sales and leads through a client, I'm going to be really focusing on those, having actually less spots so that I can be and guarantee that I'm in front of people. So I'm not missing them basically on their little breaks when they're getting up to go to the kitchen to refill their glass of water. And then cable, again, in this area, it's Spectrum, but other places, it can be Altice, which is A4 Media now, Comcast, anything along those lines. It's a case-by-case scenario. I have to say it. It's not always my go-to anymore. I do love like the local news options that you have on there, but because of the ratings, because of the CPM, and because of the difference with smart television ads and traditional cable television ads, depending on the type of device you have, it's going to be a different cost. So it just adds to it. And you're not getting the frequency that you would want out of a buy, and making sure that your money is there, because the frequency, something I talk about a lot, is the amount of times that a viewer is seeing your spot. And this is based on, through broadcast, it's typically based on ComScore ratings. Sometimes it's Nielsen still. I focused on ComScore. I'm sorry, I think I mentioned Comcast. ComScore ratings. And with that, I try to aim for a 3 frequency. And again, it's going to vary based on the objective. But the 3 frequency, my general rule is the first time you ignore it, the second time you see it, the third time you remember it. And that's what I try to really aim for, of making sure that people are getting a really good viewing of the commercial, so that we can also hit those same people through digital ads, through other traditional ads, so that we can, again, lead to more brand authority and hopefully closing more sales for our clients. Okay, so that's my spiel on television. I could go on about television all the time. I am going to get into radio next on the next slide. Just like television, radio is very much into streaming. So streaming options have changed our radio habits over the last decade. But on top of that, COVID has changed people's commuting habits. As you can see, Chris and I are home. We did not commute today, except for maybe to drop our kids off at school. But other than that, a lot of people, they're using a Spotify, they're using Pandora. And so AM/FM radio has really been hit hard based on the ratings that I see. And this is within different markets that I purchase in, not just the Albany market, but elsewhere. Like, you are seeing a decline, and that has actually been happening since even before COVID. When I first started within media buying, I would get those rankers, as they're referred to, in order to take a look at the rating, the weekly cume, all of that for all of the stations within the market. And I just kept noticing the decline. And unfortunately, again, like, because of the COVID changing our commuting habits, and a lot of us are still working from home because of it, it's just not my first go-to anymore. It used to be very much my first go-to, that AM/FM, those spots, and that's also referred to as terrestrial radio. And I put a strong focus now into Spotify and Pandora. And the main reason is because they now have self-service platforms. I mean, now, as in for a couple of years now. The CPM is fairly inexpensive when you're comparing it to AM/FM. You're able to have more control over it, and you're able to target people based on age and location. There are options for targeting based on types of playlists. Those sometimes work, sometimes don't. It's completely dependent on, what you're selling, who you're kind of trying to reach, things along those lines. But I do always keep AM/FM in my back pocket. And I like to rethink how that message gets out there. A lot of times I actually really like endorsements now. I used to hate endorsements. They were more expensive, less frequency. But now that I know how those habits have changed, and I've taken a look at everything, and I've taken a look at the numbers, when you have, especially in an era on social media where influencers on TikTok, on Facebook, on Instagram are all over the place, radio personalities, television personalities, they were the original influencers that you would be buying with. And so that's where I also will end up putting the money, is, a little bit more expensive. You're paying for talent fees on top of the live reads, but you have 30 seconds, you have 60 seconds, but you have a personality who's actually talking about something, and talking about something that they generally care about. And that is something that, we really try to be mindful of when we're placing our buys, is making sure that we're not just getting another voice out there. We like to have, we've had really great buys and really great success with some personalities who have been around in this market in particular for 20 plus years. And people trust them. And having a trusted voice who's talking to you about a service or a product a company is providing you just gives you more comfort in making those final decisions.
Real quick, I know people will say, on Spotify, for example, if I pay for a subscription, I don't hear the ads, right? So people will say, well, is it really viable then? Because, they're of that, like, no one's going to hear it if they're paying. So I just looked up the statistics on free versus paid. And this was like in the end of Q3 of 2021, Spotify had 209 million active free users, and compared to their 172 million paying. So there's actually more people listening for free that are going to hear your ads. So it is not that, it's not to be avoided because of the paid subscription model.
Absolutely. And that's definitely something to keep in mind with Hulu as well. You can pay extra to not get ads. but the majority of people are likely not going to. And that's correct on the statistic that you brought up as well. And I know that I've seen those statistics, and I check in every quarter on Spotify and Pandora when it comes to how they're doing, how those companies are doing. And the majority of people are going to go for free. And as I'll mention later on, free is me. So I don't want to pay extra just to not get ads. I want to, save money as much as I can elsewhere. And again, I will get.
And Caitlin likes to hear the ads. So that's also part of it.
I do like to hear the ads. My husband, if my husband, was going to change it, he would want to get rid of the ads.
I know she likes
but
to
he's
hear
not allowed to. I need to be able to see the competition out there. So on to the next slide. So that wraps it up really for radio, is really focusing again. It's on streaming. It's on the change of the habits. And out of home, on the next slide here, we're talking really kind of the same thing. There's a change of habit when it comes to things. So at the start of the pandemic, I canceled all billboards. People were at home. I canceled as much as I could, and transit, things along those lines, bus shelters, even just because even buses were taking a hit because of the amount of people who were not commuting. And it was a bummer, because I like out of home, and it depends on the type of message that you're looking for. And so what I changed in my tactic was, after I had canceled everything, on the highways, on the interstates, things along those lines, you focus on those secondary roads, because the secondary roads are the ones that people are now going to start taking. And again, I'm talking like March, April of 2020. And so those secondary roads are going to be your routes, your local routes, your state routes, back roads, things along those lines, where it's more local traffic. And so again, you want to tailor that messaging and make sure it's out there. You want to make sure that the creative makes sense, but now you're in a place where you can still use out of home, and you can still use it for brand awareness and brand authority in that area. But you're using it in a better way. And it also saves money. Generally speaking, it'll save money if you buy posters, as they're referred to, as opposed to bulletins. The bulletins being the very large out-of-home structures on interstates, and then the posters being much smaller on the routes. They are generally less expensive to purchase for your 4 weeks, and you don't usually get vinyl, but you still have to pay for production. And then digital billboards as well. Keeping in mind, there you don't have to pay for production, so that saves you money as well. So my fun fact for today on out of home is that out of home is the oldest form of advertising. And as I mentioned earlier on, this went back millennia. And that is because people in Egypt, anywhere, they were using out of home advertising. They didn't think of it necessarily as out of home advertising, but it was there. It was posters. It was all of these pieces that were out there for people to consume in order to get people into their shops. So it's an oldie but goodie. Location is incredibly important, as much as creative is important. And so as you can see on a couple of these slides that were pulled, one of them being Ellis Medicine Roswell Park. This was one that we did here at Overit. And then you can see a little bit above that, the Spotify ad. Very different messaging here. The Spotify one is a lot of fun. Spotify, people know Spotify already. So if you see that logo there, that's something that I actually don't mind seeing, such a small logo in that placement. I would probably say that's about 10 or 20% of that entire artwork. Whereas Ellis and Roswell Park here, this was awareness that Roswell Park and Ellis were partnering up in the Albany, Schenectady area. And this is exactly what I want to see when I am placing an out-of-home creative in order to gain awareness and authority. You have large logos and a very clear message focused on cancer. That's all you need. You don't need all this copy in order to get in there. All you need is a very quick line and logo, when you're talking about brand awareness. And, something to keep in mind as well, a fun little trick is, if you want to know if you have too much copy on a billboard before you go producing it, is you print it out in a size of a business card, you hold it out as far as you can, and you take 5 seconds to read it. And that's exactly how much time you're going to have, is between 5 and 7 seconds in order to gain somebody's attention as they are driving, whether it's on a highway, on a secondary road. That is what you want to be able to do, is capture that attention and have that attention retained. So here's another on slide 9 here. This is another really fun one that we did as well for historic Deerfield out in the Holyoke, Massachusetts.
Yeah, I love this billboard. I think it's so cool.
It is so cool. Less virtual, more reality. This is a place for experience. It's essentially a museum. And it is, I love this creative so much. These extensions, they're more expensive. They're going to be more expensive because of the production, because of the manpower that it takes to get them installed. They are worth it if they are capturing attention. So that's something very important to keep in mind as well. I will go back into location super quick as well, which is, I mentioned location being very important, and it is, because you don't want to just like get something that is like way off of, I'll say I-90, which is in the Albany area. It's way off. There's one billboard, I think Coca-Cola usually buys it, and they have an annual contract, and I can't stand the billboard because it is so far off, and they typically have such a tiny logo that it drives me crazy when I go through it. But if you're looking at it, if you're looking at other billboards as you're driving down, like you want something that's generally as low to the ground as you can, which isn't always possible, but you also generally want something that's on a right-hand read when you're driving. This is not always the case. I know that there's always going to be nuances. Sometimes you're going to have a really good spot that is a left-hand read, nice and low to the ground, things along those lines, but it's just something to keep in mind as when you're looking at the spec sheets that you get from sales reps, whether it's be Lamar or Clear Channel, you're taking a look at those and you're making sure that you can read it on the right-hand side, or it's low enough and to the right enough if you're driving on, seeing it on the left-hand side. So it's very important when keeping in mind your location and how it's being read, because if you're going to have something that's pushed off, and especially if you're going to have it pushed off and there's a lot of trees or other brush, that can cause an issue, and that can cause issues with contracts and having to communicate with sales reps as well to make sure that everything is nice and tidied and cleaned up. Okay. So direct mail, on slide 10 here, direct mail, also mentioned or also referred to as direct marketing. It's back. And I don't know if it necessarily totally went away, but it's back because, again, of COVID. So COVID has changed our media consumption habits so much. Before, I never wanted to buy direct mail for a client. I always thought that it was a huge waste. It's expensive. You're buying a list, you are buying postage, you are buying the print, you're getting it all out, plus the creative, plus you generally have a 2 to 3 week turnaround time. It's a lot that goes into it. And you have to be able to capture that individual's attention so quickly. Because if I'm going to my mailbox, I'm probably just going to toss whatever junk mail I know I'm getting. Then COVID hit. And the difference is you were stuck at home for so long that going to the mailbox was like a little vacation for you. It was going outside and doing something. And again, our habits changed. And so with those habits changing, people were actually looking forward to going and getting their mail. Now, creative is still very important. And so the fun thing that you see here was from Smith & Jones, which is powered by Overit now. And this is where I want to see more direct marketing and direct mail coming into place. When it comes to bones, we're the joint. Literally, it's a box, it's a package, it's talking about an orthopedic center. It's perfect. It makes sense with the type of creative. And that's what I want to keep seeing. You know, postcards are great. Folded mailers are great, but the creative, having something fun that stands out is going to make sure that people are actually paying attention to what you're doing and sending, which is going to help with your return on investment. So the other piece that's really important with direct mail is layering on advertising beforehand. Do not ever, please don't just drop a direct mail piece and say, here we go. That's not how it should be done. What you should be doing, and the strategy that I typically take first, and this is going to, of course, change depending on what I'm really looking for a client, is I start with awareness. And so like when you're taking a look at like a funnel, when you're talking about a funnel for sales and even for digital media planning, you always start with the top, and that's awareness. That is your out of home. Your out of home is the awareness. It is getting the brand out there. It is getting the logo out there. It is getting the message out there. Start there with those high impressions. And then you're going to get the engagement. And the engagement, those types of platforms are going to be your radio and television. And your radio and television, that is a 15, 30, 60-second spot. You have more time for messaging. You can add in sonic branding, a jingle here or there. You get the messaging out there. You get the name out there even more. And then you hit with the intent. And that is the direct mail piece. So the direct mail piece being that closure, getting into those homes directly with your mail in order to close a lead or sale or really push for that brand authority. So what I generally like to do, and again, this varies, is out of home, starting that minimum 2 weeks before I start television. And that out of home will continue running for another 4 to 6 weeks. And then television will run, and that'll run for another 4 to 6 weeks. And then the direct mail drop happens 4 to 6 weeks after all of the advertising piece starts. And that is because you want the reach, you want the frequency, you want the awareness, you want the authority. So that has been my go-to when it comes to media strategies. And I've seen really great success when it comes to that. And another postcard example that we have here on slide 11 is join the Ellis Elite. Again, this was a postcard example. So you have two very different types of direct mail, and you can see the QR code here. This is really fantastic for measurement. QR codes, again, really came back because of COVID. Restaurants now, a lot of contactless menus people want. So the people are generally going to have QR code apps on their phone, those readers on their phone. So now you can use that for your direct mail too. And that's going to take people to the website in an easy way, as opposed to going in and typing in the URL. The URL is great, and I definitely encourage continuing to have that on there, as well as the option for the QR code for any direct mail pieces that would be going on. And then this part is probably going to upset a few people, but on slide 12, I talk about print. Print, on the other hand, it still serves a purpose, but it's for specific audiences, boomers and business. I totally acknowledge that this varies by market. The majority of markets that I work in, this is going to be the case. So you really have to know your audience. And when I'm talking about business, it's business to business. It's, if I'm trying to reach people with workforce development, I'm going to buy print, whether it be a local paper, whether it be a business review paper, magazine, anything along those lines. It's still very viable in that sense, but you have to make sure that you make a deal. And the deal is you don't just buy the print. If they have a website, you get digital as well. And if they have an e-edition, you get the e-edition as well. You want to make sure that it's layered and hitting as many avenues as you can. And the reason is because since print has kind of like been hit hard, I've seen the rates increasing, it's supply and demand. So the rates are increasing when it comes to the advertising. And so I try to balance it as much as possible, when making sure that I'm making the right budget choices. But if I find it viable, that's great. We want to move forward with it, and we want to use what's right for our audience.
So we are on slide 13. We're going to talk about why and how to plan. I just want to remind everybody, if you have questions, you can enter them into the various mediums that you're watching this on. Just enter your questions in the comments, and we will get to them at the end. Sorry, Kate.
No, you're good. So why should you have a media buyer? So I am a media buyer. I'm a director of media, but I'm a media buyer. I am dedicated to negotiating rates, understanding deadlines, and handling and stretching budgets as much as possible. I consider myself a layer of protection to your business. And what that means is that I am making sure that all of your ads are running on time, by deadline, with the right creative. That way, it helps with you. when you're dealing with the sales reps. So that's like always a positive that I hear from clients is like, I say, you don't have to talk to sales reps. You can forward them on over to me. I take care of that communication. I have relationships with about 100 plus sales reps throughout New York State alone. And that is going to vary from television to radio to print, what have you. And so with that, you know, they're marketing specialists, but that's how they are marketed as marketing specialists. They're still sales reps. They're still making sales for their business. And so while they definitely, I do believe, have their best intentions in mind, they are not seeing. So if I'm going just to television and it's just you talking to a television rep, you know, they're not seeing what's happening on radio. They're not seeing what could be happening on OTT. They're not seeing what could be happening with out of home, but I can. And so with that, or a media buyer can. They are the ones who are taking a look at all of those mediums and putting it all together. And so that's what I say all the time. It's a piece of a puzzle. And I am the one who is putting all of those pieces together because I am basing your media strategy on what your marketing goals are. And so I'm making all of that fit together. The other thing, as I mentioned with the negotiating, is, and I'll get into this more, is negotiating is really fun for me. I mentioned earlier, if it's free, it's me. And I try to stretch dollars as much as possible. And those are with very simple things that I know that I can ask, but also certain negotiation tactics that I know that I have skills from over the years of learning how to talk with people and learning how to do this job, essentially. And so on the next slide, how do you start planning your media? So as I mentioned, I want to take a look at your marketing strategy. That comes first. You develop your marketing goals. You develop your KPIs. We understand your message, your target, the budget. And then comes a media strategy. And I know that this can be a little bit tit for tat, tomato, tomato. Media strategy, media plan, different. Reason being is because in the media strategy, I am just very overarching, choosing the media, the flights, the audiences, and then I'm giving like a budget breakdown, but it's more of a general budget breakdown. So I'm saying I'll put $10,000 here, I'll put $20,000 here, $5,000 there. And it gives me a direction of where I want to go. And then once we all settle that this is the media strategy that we want to go with, I go into the planning. And that is when I get granular. That is when I pick those final media placements. We understand the creative needs and decide on that final budget. And so with that, I will now say, okay, I have $10,000 for television. So I can only afford one broadcast station, you know, and again, this is going to vary completely by market and understanding media market cost. But I am going to go and I'm going to say, since I only have $10,000 and that's in my television bucket, I'm going to take a look at the avails being short for availabilities. And I'm going to go base it off of my audience, ComScore, adults 25-54, something broad along those lines. I'm going to take a look at the rating. I'm going to take a look at the share, and then I'm going to take a look at the CPP, cost per point. Cost per point tells me how much money I am spending on every rating point that program has. And so I try to use that as like my guideline of value and efficiency within my media budget. And then that's when I go through and I say, like, what has the best CPP for the best share being how many people in one market, one given time are looking or watching TV. So say I have 3 stations, actually better to use 4 as an example. Say I have 4 stations and one of them has a 50% share. They are getting 50% of the households who are currently watching television on that program at any given time. That's a lot, by the way. That's not, not a super great example, but it was easy for math. And so when I'm doing that media planning, that is when I'm getting into that type of budgeting. I am getting super, super granular when it comes to picking those programs. And then it's the buy, negotiating and finalizing those contracts. And so negotiation always includes, and this is a tip that literally anybody can use, and it's so simple. What can you give me for added value? Write it down, keep it in your back pocket, always, always, always use it. Even if the vendor is unable to give added value, for whatever reason. I usually see that with like out of home, especially if you're only going to be doing a 4-week buy, something along those lines. You have to ask for added value. If you do not ask for added value, depending on the relationship with your sales rep, especially when it comes to broadcast, television, and radio, they're not obligated to give it to you. They may want to. They may do it just so that they can continue to make sales and help nurture your relationship with them, which is great. But if you don't ask for it, they're not obligated to give it to you. The added value is where it helps stretch those dollars. Another fun negotiating tip that I like is, you got to know what's in your cards first. You don't just go and say, I don't have a budget, just throw something at me. Don't do that. Come in prepared, have an idea. And so if I know I can spend $25,000 on what have you on television, and I'm going to go to a rep, I'm not going to tell them I have $25,000. I'm not going to let them know how much I actually have. I'm going to tell them a limit, and that could be anywhere between 15,000, 20,000, something along those lines. And that's what I'm going to say to them. And then, depending on what they give me for added value, rate breaks, things along those lines, what can you give me if I go for $5,000 more? And that helps with the negotiations because it will help you get a little bit more of a break on rates. It'll help you with the amount of added value. Because essentially, if you're saying, hey, I can give you $5,000 more in money, but you have to be able to meet me there, they're going to push for it. So that's always a really fun tip. And that's why I like negotiating. That's why I like that kind of stuff, because it's a little bit of a tit for tat and it's a little bit of a game that we play. And so that is how you start planning for media. So again, it's the marketing strategy, it's the media strategy, then it's the media plan, and then it's the media buy. So breaking it down, who, what, where, when, how, and why. Talk about your goal. What is your goal? Again, if it's awareness, that's great. So now I know with the awareness piece, then I am going to blanket out where I can, depending on the budget. Who is your target audience? I very briefly mentioned a very broad audience, 25 to 54. That's a very broad audience. But if I am looking for awareness, I'm generally going to go for that kind of audience. If I am looking at something that's B2B, I will generally go 35 to 54. If I am looking at a senior living area, I'm going to go 54 to 65 plus. Those are usually those kind of limits. And again, that's taking a look at strictly what is you're able to do within traditional media. Now, when you get into streaming services, you can get a little bit more granular because, as I mentioned earlier, you have those kind of digital targeting capabilities. And so I am able to say to Hulu or OTT, and I can go in there and I can say, I want to very specifically target 55 to 65, nothing else, nothing higher, anything like that. And we're able to get a little bit more granular there. Where is your media market? My media market is going to vary all over the place. Albany, Schenectady, Troy area is a really great starting point for me. We are ranked somewhere between 55 and 60th, I believe, still on the Nielsen DMAs when it comes to market size. And so market size is going to vary from New York City being number 1, LA number 2, and then you can get into some like Elmira, New York. That's going to be in the 1 or 200s. And so the cost is going to be a lot different. So if I'm saying that I want to reach, so many people in Elmira, New York versus the Albany, Schenectady, Troy area, to compare it, I probably only need about a third of the budget in Elmira than I do in the Albany, Schenectady, Troy area, because the population is different, the media consumption is a little different, but also the cost, because of the amount of viewers, the cost of the media is going to be less expensive. And that is true for television, radio, out of home from that area. And then when do you want to advertise? This is so important when we're talking about when we want to advertise. And I'm not talking about day parts. I am talking about months, weeks, years. And that really has to go down to this year in particular. I have already warned some of my clients, I am likely not going to place much television in October, November, December, because Q4 of this year is going to be insane, with especially New York State with the governor's election, comptroller election. You have it's starting in November and December. A lot of those rates are going to go up because it's the end of the year, it's the end of the quarter. Sales reps have to meet their goals, and retail is out there for the holiday shopping season. So if you want to get in there now, like, you have to start planning now. So be prepared when it comes to those rates, because those rates are going to get hiked. On top of that, added value is nearly impossible to get during that kind of time period, because there are certain rules when it comes to media buys and placements for elections in particular. But also, they might not have the inventory to begin with to be able to give the added value, to give those runner shows. And even if you don't, or even if you do end up getting some added value, you're not going to get great placement. It's going to be like 1 a.m., 2 a.m., when majority of people are sleeping. TV could be on in the background while you're snoring, but other than that, you're not getting many people who are going to be seeing it. So when you want to advertise is key. Another fun little tidbit is the end of every month is generally going to be more expensive than the first 2.5 weeks. Reason being, historically, car dealerships are trying to finalize their monthly sales. And so they usually have a blitz at the end of every month with a lot of ads on radio, on television, things along those lines. So it's going to be more expensive for any type of broadcast medium that you use, cable, things along those lines. Hulu and OTT, Spotify and Pandora, something to note, this doesn't qualify for them. So the flights aren't going to change for them. The CPM isn't necessarily going to change for them unless their inventory is very, very tight. And I've run into that only one time with Hulu. I believe it was Q4 of 2020, when I had to end up locking in a higher CPM, I believe by an additional $10 because of the amount of inventory that was coming in. So again, it's a supply and demand. You have to be able to plan for it. And so that's one of the things that I try to make sure that I'm really pushing forward with my clients, is making sure that they are prepared to have a plan months in advance. Because if I'm going to be waiting until the last minute, I'm going to be getting the higher rates. I'm going to be getting less added value. And then budget. It's okay if you have to work backwards on budget, but this is bolded because this is so, so, so important. How much money do I have to spend? It's okay if you can work backwards. It's okay to do that. But I encourage going in with an idea. And the reason being is because if I'm saying, hey, I really want to go into the Super Bowl this year. I really want to go into the Super Bowl. Okay. Do you have $75,000 for one DMA? Likely not, and so that's something that you're going to run into. So you want to be able to manage those expectations. So yes, $75,000 was what I was quoted this year when it came to the Super Bowl for a 30-second spot in the Albany DMA, which was a huge, huge bummer because of the amount of increase from last year, where I believe it was negotiated down to $20,000 from 25. So again, it's totally okay to work backwards, but manage those expectations, whether it be a program, whether it be the time of year, anything along those lines. Determining your mediums. Again, this goes all within everything else that I just mentioned. Goal, audience, media market, where you want to advertise, and then negotiate. Try to get those rates down. Try to drive that down. If you have to, if you only have the money to say, hey, I'm going to go with my local ABC affiliate or my NBC affiliate, go to both of them and say, one of you is going to get this money. What can you give to me? Stretch it as far as you can. So measurement. So this will complete where I really want to go with traditional media. And that is traditional media in the digital media-led advertising world. How do you measure success? It's tough. And I get this question a lot. Chris, as he mentioned earlier, he really pushes on me to try to push this as much as possible and as far as possible. I have gone into trying to create formulas and trying to create brand scores, but it's nothing really necessarily can do it and necessarily work. So I'm going into a little bit more of a traditional way to measure traditional media. And that is surveys. So surveys, you're going to be asking questions like, where do you recognize a brand? And so that would be television, radio, internet ads, search engine, things along those lines, and start plotting those responses. You can do monthly is preferred, depending on the amount of ads that you run on a regular basis, but something that's quarterly is definitely okay as well. I wouldn't have anything less than quarterly, but having it twice a year could possibly be doable, but it might not get the best information out of it. So you want to be mindful there. But other than that, I measure it through the impressions, reach, frequency, the CPM, how much does it cost to reach every 1,000 individuals, and then those surveys. And then in the next slide is a graph of aided and unaided brand awareness. So this is something that would be inclusive in the survey that would be sent out. And it's the aided and unaided brand awareness, where how name a brand, and we would either have it be blind, and you would go in and you would type in the type of brand, whatever industry we choose that we're doing the survey for. And then we also do one with logos. And so you can plot this up and down, up and down, up and down of what these percentages are for aided and unaided brand awareness. And then you plot it against the impressions that you serve. Generally, when we do this, we end up seeing a bit of a lag. It's about a month to 2 month lag or so of the aided and unaided brand awareness going up from when advertising really hit and those impressions were really forced out there through whether it be out of home, television, along those lines. So those are the strides that we're taking here at Overit to really make sure that we are going forward with making sure that we are measuring the success of those campaigns, because I don't want it to just be, we didn't see our ad on TV. No, others saw your ad, and this is how, and this is why.
Just a couple of quick notes on this slide of this sort of up and down, blue and red. A couple things we've noticed with this is a client that we work with in the blue is your aided awareness. And you can see that like there are some sustained high periods, like I think that's like from August in the middle of that graph through December, September to December. And then there's another one from like May through August later on. And we don't have the impressions plotted here, but like Caitlin mentioned, if you were to plot the impressions there, they correlate. Like when the impressions are highest or at reach a certain threshold, you get a sustained increase in your brand awareness. And that I was actually very surprised to see such a tight correlation. I thought it wouldn't be as, but there is and what that helps us to understand, one, is the campaign working, but two, it gets us a sense for how many impressions do we need to out there to drive awareness to a level that we're looking for. So it's really important to have a baseline. Do a survey before you start all of your buys, then do your buys and compare it to the baseline and track it as much as you can over time. And you will start to see trends that can help you. Like Caitlin said, it's never going to be one-to-one. It's always correlative. You're never going to get cause and effect unless you have a QR code or something like that. But this will really help. And we are now pushing all of our clients when they're doing traditional buys to include this as part of their traditional strategy.
Okay, so the key takeaways that we have here for today: traditional media is still valuable, and it's important for any marketing and media strategy. It's just shifting, and measurement is on its way there. Television, especially streaming, is where I would put money. Streaming radio over AM, FM radio almost any day. Direct mail has a breath of fresh air to it. I would mostly pass on print. Out of home is like Yoda, and we need to show some respect here to our elders. And planning prevents poor performance. This is really, really key when it comes to media planning and buying, is making sure we are planning ahead, because it is helpful when you're planning your messaging, your creative, your measurement, audience, all of that, and keeping in mind the budget. And ask for added value. Always, always, always ask for added value. So it comes to our Q&A section of today.
All right, so I'm gonna look I'm just checking to see for any questions. While I do that, one of the things that I get from a lot of people is they know they want to be on TV, like, right? So like they'll say things like, all of our competitors are on TV. We really want to get on TV. And, you know, we might agree with that. You might agree with that as a strategist. So yes, you need to be on TV. And they're going to say, but I only have this amount of money. So is there, how do you make a determination of, is it worth it? Because you can throw an ad on TV and spend the money to make a really nice spot, but it only goes up and it's not really seen that much. And then you're just sort of like, is there like diminishing returns if you're not willing to put enough money into, you mentioned frequency. So how do people address that? You don't just go on TV to go on TV, right? You have to be able to sustain, right?
Absolutely. You do have to be able to sustain. Part of that does come in, again, not just into the budget itself, but what you can negotiate out of it. Another great option, if budget is very tight, but you want to be on TV and you need to be on TV, an option that you can always use is doing a type of sponsorship with one of your local television stations. So one of your ABC, NBC, CBS affiliates, where it would be this part of the news sponsored by Overit Media. And then you get like a 5-second tag. There is no additional production to it besides sending them over a logo, sending them over that 5 to 10-second tag, and then they're the ones who are recording it in there. It gets your name out there. You know, it's maybe not ideal, but it does work. And it gives you a more frequency on a tight budget. But yes, if you're saying that, you know, I need to get out there and I need to get there because my competitors are there, unfortunately, you're going to have to pony up with the money as well, which it seems it's an investment. So it's an investment that you're not going to see a return on right away. And that is something that, again, you have to manage those expectations very, very clearly, which is I'm not going to just see like phone calls coming in, email forms coming in the moment the first television spot hits. No, it's going to take some time. And that's something to keep in mind. People have to be able to see it a good amount of times. You have to get in front of those right people. You have to have good reach. And the messaging is so important. You know, it's not just where I'm placing the media. I could have the best media buy ever that has the most cost efficient spot placements, the best added value. But if my television spot is just not good, to put it lightly, like it's not going to resonate with people. You know, we've done we've done really wonderful television spots. And that is something where I make sure that I am talking with account managers and making it very clear as well with like motion and creative and content, is making sure that the message makes sense and is appropriate for the medium that we're on.
Another question is, are streaming radio ads expensive, like CPM wise, things like that?
That's a good question. So it can vary, and that variance is really going to come based on the again, market generally, but it's not going to vary by ton. Generally, I see a CPM anywhere between $9 and I think I've seen like a max at 15. That's not bad at all, especially when you're comparing it to like OTT and Hulu, which again, as I mentioned, is anywhere from 35 plus when it comes to a CPM. Is it going to be more expensive than a digital ad, a YouTube ad? Yes. But again, it's where you're bridging the digital traditional kind of media that's out there. So you got to kind of keep that in mind.
What about minimums, Kate? Are there minimums?
There's no, there is a minimum when it does come to the spend. It's $250 per campaign, $250 per campaign, which is going to get you, sorry to anybody from AM, FM radio who may be listening, it's going to get you farther than anything you're going to place on traditional radio. $250 is not much. I need a minimum of $2,500 for a radio spot, at least within this market, the Albany market. So 250 is the minimum. And that campaign, I mean, that could be whatever that campaign is. So if I'm only running for a week, it's 250. If I'm running for a year, it's 250, you know, so it's going to stretch those dollars. But again, it might not, if you're running for such a long period of time, you're not getting that frequency that you want. And real quick on Spotify and Pandora as well, on Spotify, you can run video ads. So keeping that in mind, you can utilize video. The amount of people who are actually watching it, I am sure is very low because you're generally working while listening to it or in the car. But if you need to save a little bit of time, you can repurpose your television spot on Spotify. Can't on Pandora yet.
Well, I mean, also their audio, like those mediums allow you to do some things creatively. I feel that you might not be able to get away with, or you want, like, so, like we deal with a lot of home service clients, like pest control. So like buzzing, bugs
Yep.
buzzing, like things you're in your ear, and like audio branding is very, very big. Your brain hears sounds and remembers sounds. So you can get creative with how you do your spots on audio, and allows you to be more fun, if you will, on that sort of medium. So that's just a note there.
Absolutely.
So it's 1:00. So I think we should probably wrap up. Thank you for everyone that joined. We excuse me, we have our email addresses. They're up there for Caitlin and myself. If there's any questions, concerns, or if you're looking for some strategic advice on your media buying or media planning, we can help you with that at Overit. So just give us an email. And again, Kate, thank you very much. I asked Kate if there's going to be an episode 2, since this is Media Wars episode 1. I'm not really sure in Star Wars about what that means, but I hope that we will do an episode 2. So stay tuned for that, and we'll come back to you with some more media talk. So thanks, Kate. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. May the force be with you.
There it is. May the force be with you.
Okay, day. Bye.
Bye.